Good morning, everyone, and I really appreciate your taking the time to be here today for this important discussion we're going to have about a topic that we all know very well and have been talking about for many years, but we are making progress, and today we'll hear some progress. But this is the quest for the Holy Grail, accelerating investment in water. I'm Tom Piniella. I'm the Director for Natural Capital at the Asian Development Bank, but have been working in the water sector there for quite some time, and it's a pleasure to see many familiar faces here in the audience. As we know, globally, the world is facing a significant financing gap, which is constraining achievement of SDG 6, but all the SDGs and related SDGs. And more importantly, for Asia and the Pacific, this is especially acute. OECD has estimated that governments will need to invest 1% to 2% of their GDP up until 2030 to achieve universally accessible water supply and sanitation. Now, we also know that we have the challenges of land use change and especially climate change, and this will make this challenge even more difficult to achieve the SDGs and make them much more expensive. Therefore, as we all know, it's important that we have to crowd in additional financing, and mainly from the private sector. Asia and the Pacific is lacking in this area. 90% of water infrastructure is still publicly sector financed. And despite the importance of water, we also know that it's undervalued, and the ecosystem services it supports, these are also undervalued, which limits the appetite for investment into the water sector. However, to bring in the private sector, not only must we value water properly, there are also some institutional, policy, and other bottlenecks that prevent private sector capital from coming in, and we need to think about how we can strategically improve the enabling environment so that it is attractive to private capital and/or private capital with support from the public sector. So this morning's session, we'll hear from a very distinguished group of speakers who'll talk about some of the tools and experiences from Indonesia, India, Vietnam, and how these countries have implemented innovative approaches to mobilize more investment. I will introduce the distinguished speakers as they come up to speak. I think you can see them all up here. But I'm very pleased and honored to have our opening speaker, and that is Makman Basuki, the Minister of Public Works in Indonesia, who's been head of PU since 2014. Before his appointment as minister, he had a very long and distinguished career with the Indonesian Civil Service, working at the Ministry of Public Works for many years. He was also the vice president of ICID from 2013 to 2016. And it's my great honor to welcome him to make some opening remarks. Pak Basuki.
Thank you, Mr. Tom Piniella. Distinguished Mr. Tom, the Director for Agriculture, Food, Nature, and Rural Development of ADB. Distinguished speakers here or online, guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is real my honor to be here, and I'm happy to be here with you in this very special Stockholm World Water Week 2023. Besides that, this is the first time that I visit Stockholm. The world's nations have been growing attention on the notion of sustainable development to ensure the quality of life in the future. In 2015, all United Nations member states adopted the 2030 agenda for sustainable development that provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for all people and the entire planet. Water is also essential for economic growth, human health, and the environment. Countries around are facing significant challenges in managing their water resources efficiently and effectively. Developing countries are facing a shortfall of at least 4.2 trillion US dollar in financing to keep them on a track for the 2030 SDGs, as governments and investors grapple with the health, economic, and social impact of the COVID-19 crisis. Climate change worsens, the water quality degrades, and will potentially result in over half of the world population to be projected to live in water-stressed region, and for water-related disaster to happen more by 2050. In Indonesia, since January until now, it's already more than 2,500 water-related disasters happen. We call in Indonesia, it's like a shopping mall for disaster. You can name it every disaster that related to water. The other challenge would be food and water security. The operational requirements to support 151.6 million people in 2022 is 22.2 billion US dollar, but the global funding forecast only provide for less than half this requirement. In Indonesia, our drinking water, sanitation and reservoir projects only depend on its central government funds and regional government funds. These funds are very limited, while those infrastructure are urgently needed. Now in Indonesia, we built 61 during my services as a Minister of Public Works. We built 61 dams. Until now, it's already constructed, finished 36. This year it will be finished 10 and another 15 for next year. To solve the problem, we are promoting collaboration between the central government, regional government, and the private sector in provision of water, sanitation, and reservoir. We direct our policies and action to new and collective principles and embedded them in collaborative design, investment, and innovation. Currently, there are several public-private partnership projects in water and sanitation that have been running in Indonesia. We already have 4 regional water supply system under the PPP project. Now it's already in operational, and also it's under the preparation now 5 dams, 5 regional water supply system, and 1 solid waste facilities. Establishing institutions at the global level can channel funds and scale up investment under the funding platform of Global Water Funds. This platform is not only aimed at providing lower interest financing sources by blended financing facilities, but also to promote a just distribution of global assets. In Indonesia, we have formed the Indonesia Water Fund to collect investor funds to accelerate the provision of water infrastructure. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, apart from sharing our experiences, I just want to invite you to remind you that there will be the 10th World Water Forum in Bali in May 2024. As this financing of water will be discussed in the forum under the theme sustainable water finance, that some intermediary results have been achieved with the following details. First, expanding PPP financing to water, adopting integrated source to tap approach, implementing blended finance model. And then second, promoting innovation in the form of blended finance platform, a blended finance implementation, which includes managing political interface and planning risk, and enhancing governance policies to support blended finance are being proposed. And the third, promoting the development of small-scale public-private partnership, project structurization to increase efficiency, the improvement of creditworthiness for service providers to access microfinancing facilities. And the fourth, promoting green finance and securing funding for water crisis prevention and climate resilience. As the important milestone toward May 2024, we will also conduct the second stakeholders consultation meeting in the October 2023 in Bali. The date is 12 to 13 October. And this meeting aims to have the updated exchanges of detailed political, thematic, and regional issues, and to have an in-depth discussion with process working groups how to plan forum week with final deliverables, including follow-up action after the forum. We look forward to your participation in the 10 World Water Forum process. This forum process will coordinate diversified actions and implementation of solutions through prioritized political agenda and identified primary theme, as well as regional needs to spare water for shared prosperity. And I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Basuki, for that very clear message, and we welcome the invite to Bali, and especially on the finance and economics themes. ADB looks forward to leading that sub-theme along with PEU for the forum. So let's move on to our first speaker, and this is Delia Con Sanchez, and she served as an official at the OECD, where she supports governments with water adaptation and water security challenges. She leads the work on water financing, in particular for the enabling conditions for investments in water security. Delia, why don't you come up? And just to set it, what factors contribute to the enabling environment for water finance? Scorecard in selected Asian countries. You can come here. You do it.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, here we go. So, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for the introduction and the opportunity to be here. So at the OECD, since 2017, we have here two clear messages from investors in the roundtable on financing water. First, it's not only about more money, but using better the current financing we have, but also that to be able to attract investment, there is a set of conditions that need to be in place. However, when we start to assess what are these conditions, we quickly realize there are not standards, no agreement, no knowledge still agree on what should they be. So this is when we start to identify these enabling conditions, and when I say we, I mean a team in-house at the OECD, between teams, divisions and directorates, but also outside. So we have a wide range of experts discussing what are the enabling conditions in terms of risk. Is this condition increasing the risk for an investor or decreasing this risk? And also in terms of returns. Of course, we talk about financial return, but also social and large sense of economic returns, because this is a tool for public and private investors. When we started to list all these conditions, we realized that can be divided in 4 dimensions. The first one, a very easy one to say, is the country attractive for investment in general? This is composed of 11 indicators and uses data sources that are already available online. Macroeconomic indicators, domestic finance, non-commercial risk, and many others. The second condition, because water is only, how do we assess if a country is attractive for investment in water? So there is where we have to look into the water policy framework. The classic things we always hear: governance, policy, regulation, economic instrument, capacity, nothing new for you. However, what we think the tool addresses is an extra step. It's not only about having the policy in place. Is this policy effective? It's not only having pollution charges in place. Are they effective? How are they effective? Are they used for all users? And the third question we are trying to answer, because it's not only about the overall country and the water sector, it's about the project we offer to investors. So they have to be, of course, sustainable in terms of environment and social conditions, but they also have to be bankable. They have to be attractive. As we have been here, we have to have mechanisms in place to pull them, to make them attractive. And finally, the most complex one, because you can invest in a country, but if other economic sectors are decreasing the quality or the quantity of the water, your investment might be jeopardized. So we look into how other sectors contribute or not to water security. So we look into double materiality, incentive, household subsidies, and disclosure place for corporates. So once we have this framework and all this looks great in theory, we thought, okay, now theory is great, but it's even better if it works. So let's develop a tool, and this is what we have the opportunity to collaborate, and thank you to ADB for this great opportunity to develop a tool. So this is what you can expect from the tool. The tool, and this is the pilot test we did in 7 Asian countries with ADB, provides you a number, overall scoring, in terms of is the country attractive for investment, are the conditions there? And as you can see, these pilot tests have a very similar group of countries. And the tool offers you a benchmark, a comparison of countries within a region. And what I think is more interesting is how we get this figure. So actually, the previous figure you saw is divided in these 4 dimensions I mentioned. So first one, investment in general. Second, water. Third, projects. And 4, other economic sectors. So actually, this is where we can see opportunities for investment. We can identify barriers, but we can also see synergies at a larger level in regions. So as you can see, the tool allows you this cross-countries comparison, but also allows you to make a focus on one particular country. So this is why I would like to introduce you Armenia results. So from the outside, I don't know if you have worked with Armenia, you will say, well, it looks like they have a quite strong enabling environment. They have been able to attract private sector. 80% of the population is under an arrangement with a service provider. However, when we started to do the analysis, we realized that, yes, this is true, but the picture is more complex. So here I'm presenting D1, the overall investment, but also D2, the water. So here is divided between water resource management, drinking water, rural and urban, sanitation, urban and rural, hydropower, irrigation, projects, and economic sectors. So just to give you an idea, when we start to develop the tool, we don't want to be just another scoring. We want to be able to support and help governments to see where they can have the biggest impact when removing barriers for investment. So I'm taking the example of sanitation because I think it was very illustrative. We were discussing about what conditions are or not in place in Armenia for investment in sanitation. First, they don't have a sectoral strategic plan in place, which already doesn't give you a vision of where you want to go. Therefore, there is no investment plan. And on top of that, they don't have a standard for wastewater treatment. Therefore, it's not one condition, but a combination of conditions that make investors not to find it attractive. And what was very interesting is when we present this result to the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Finance, Agriculture in Armenia, but also donors, and we sit all around the table. First, there was an agreement on the result. That was first a good thing. But the second is, what can we do? How can we remove this barrier? What are the priorities? And we quickly identified that, for example, some donors will be interested on financing, sectoral plans, while the Ministry of Finance was, in that case, able or willing to support an investment plan. And the Ministry of Environment actually was not being able to develop standards because there was no money to be able to reach this standard. So by identifying the barriers, but also their linkages and their causalities, we were able to have a strong discussion on, okay, less effectively, where can we have the biggest impact if we remove these barriers? So this is a long work, so I'm being very briefly, but I would like to say that this is a work in progress. And we did 7 Asian countries, now we are starting Eastern European countries. So Armenia is finished, but we are then following with Uzbekistan. Our vision for this tool is that it will be an open source for ministries of finance, ministries of water, infrastructures, but also donors and ministries of foreign affairs. And of course, this is, we think, a quite big work, so we are looking for collaboration, discussion. So if your organization has any comments, any contribution that you think are relevant around the enabling conditions for investment, please come to talk to me at any moment during the conference. And again, I would like to thank you again, ADB, for the incredible support that is making possible to remove barriers for investment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We are very pleased to have this opportunity for cooperation, and seeing from these results, it seems it'll be a very useful tool for us. Next, let me introduce Sophie Tremolet, who's Europe Freshwater Director for Nature Conservancy, where she leads development, implementation of program to accelerate investment in NBS in Europe. To set the stage, Sophie, accelerating investment in water and nature to protect and restore ecosystems. What's the experience? How do we do it? Thank you.
Tom, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm waiting for the slides to open, but in the meantime, I'd like to effectively start my presentation by saying that I'm going to focus on a thematic approach rather than the thematic approach rather than geographic, effectively drawing your attention to the need for investments in nature, in freshwater systems integrity, which is critical to water security. So that's really what drives us all here. And I work for the Nature Conservancy, which is an environmental organization that is working to achieve stemming biodiversity loss, as well as adapting to climate change and helping with mitigation to climate change. At the heart of that is fresh water, and what we are pressing upon here in conferences at Bali, World Water Forum, etc., is the need to place the integrity of freshwater systems at the heart of how we think about water security, but also, therefore, at the heart of how we invest in water security. What we know is that there are a lot of different drivers, many of which are linked to natural factors that have an impact on water security as we know it. We have been very much focused on achieving access to water, and this is impacted by population growth and urbanization. But all these other factors listed here are also impacting the integrity of these freshwater systems on which the delivery of water as a resource is dependent upon. And what we know worldwide, and this is true, of course, in the Asian continent, is that many of these freshwater systems are heavily degraded. We're estimating that 40% of watersheds are degraded. Many of these rivers are dammed. 87% of global wetlands have been lost in the past 300 years, which has caused a rapid decline in freshwater biodiversity, which is the biome that has been most impacted by what we know in terms of decline in biodiversity. And that drags the overall biodiversity curve downwards. We've lost 83% of freshwater biodiversity since the 1970s. So when we look at what we need to do, what we need to invest, conventional modern approaches rely on technical fixes to increase water security. We've been building water and wastewater treatment plants. We're looking at building reservoirs, interbasin transfers, desalination plants when, freshwater resources are not sufficient. But that doesn't do very much for preserving and restoring the integrity of these freshwater systems. So we need to diversify the set of investments that we're looking at. And natural systems is, a key plank of what should be an investment strategy in the water sector. So by that, at the very overall scope, we mean protecting forests, for example, so that they can serve as natural sponges and retain water and release water into the ecosystems. Planting trees, improving agricultural practices, restoring river systems, protecting and restoring wetlands. All of this is now sort of falls under the umbrella, the terminology that has been gaining in prominence over the past few years, which is the terminology of nature-based solutions, which was first coined by the International Union for Conservation of Nature in 2016. And you have a definition here on the slide, and has now sort of been adopted, if you want, more greatly in the water sector and the climate community. So it's a useful term that enables us to look at what are these solutions that can protect, manage, and restore natural ecosystems for societal benefits and biodiversity benefits. And we, of course, focused here on water security, but what is important to see is because they're nature-based solutions, they can also deliver multiple co-benefits to address all these other societal challenges that we are concerned about. So in the water sector, what are we talking about? So I gave you a very quick snapshot with pictures, but in our work at the Nature Conservancy, we group those nature-based solutions in four main categories. One is focused on protection of existing freshwater systems, natural systems, on the assumption, and it's a proven assumption, that it's always cheaper to protect what exists rather than destroy and restore, right? So that should be the first point of entry. How can we protect what exists? And that can include solutions such as national park designation, fencing, support for park guards, so we have effective management as well of protected areas. We then look at restoration, management, so an important point here is agricultural best management practices, forestry best management practices, so as to reduce risk of fire. We've seen, the great increase in fire risk everywhere, but all of this needs funding, right? And the last category would be the creation of natural environment, for example, created artificial wetlands, artificial grassland, or SUDs, sustainable urban drainage systems. So these solutions can help address three main challenges in terms of water security: maintaining or improving water quality, fighting against nutrient runoff, soil erosion, maintaining or improving river flows and aquifer recharge, so from a water availability point of view, or reducing the impact of flooding. And because they are natural solutions, they can also deliver multiple benefits in terms of adaptation, mitigation, but also biodiversity conservation, of course, which is at the heart of nature-based solutions, as well as human health, jobs, and social cohesion. So all of these benefits need to be taken into account when evaluating the case for investing in those solutions, because sometimes, for example, amenity benefits can drive a big part of the return on investment analysis. And that's what we've done. In 2017, we did a large global-scale analysis of a return on investment for a specific set of nature-based solutions and specific set of challenge, which is looking at how, if we invested at scale in nature-based solutions for nutrient and erosion control, what would be the return on investment for water service providers? Because one of the specificity of our approach is we're really looking at it from a water service delivery point of view. Does it make sense? Can it compete with grey infrastructure? And we found actually that 4 out of 5 large cities would have a positive ROI, and many of these are in Asia, right? So you can see the sort of black dots all over the place in India, Asia, Africa, Latin America, Europe. These are all regions where we're working. But The case at the moment, the problem at the moment is that investments in nature-based solutions is a tiny fraction of investments going into the water sector. So even though they are seen as cost-efficient and solutions, not much money at all is going into these solutions as compared to grey infrastructure that I cited before. And there are many reasons for that. One of them, if we're talking about finance, is the fact that the benefits are multiple, as I mentioned earlier, which means that they accrue to multiple beneficiaries, and they are therefore also potential revenue streams are very fragmented, right? So we can pay for these solutions through environmental tariffs, payment for ecosystem services, public subsidies, philanthropy, which is what we use a lot to catalyze those solutions, but also commercial revenues, visit fees for ecosystems, tourism, etc. Ecotourism, I'm sorry. So the fact that there are multiple revenue streams means that it is quite complex from a governance point of view. You can't just have a single tariff from a single operator, which is why TNC has been working on creating funding mechanisms, what we call water funds, to look at how we can attract multiple revenue streams to go into a watershed investment program to deliver significant results, right? So can we invest in the watershed, for example, on agricultural practices in order to reduce soil erosion going into the river? And there will be a benefit for the water utility because it will reduce turbidity in the river and therefore reduce the risk of closure of a water treatment plant. And that will also impact other actors that would benefit from it. So we need to find a way of bringing together multiple beneficiaries into one structure. And for that, we've got a very prominent example that we've been building upon. You may have heard of the case of New York City, which had this case, where they needed to invest in upgrading their water treatment. And they made the choice of, instead of upgrading and moving to, reverse osmosis or sort of high level of water treatment, what they did is they set up the sort of New York City Watershed Agreement investment program to invest in where their water is coming from, in the Catskills, in the upper watershed, and work with farmers in order to improve their agricultural practices so that it would limit pollution into the river. The result of that is that New York's drinking water quality is among the best in the world. That's why you can only eat New York bagel in New York, because it's very dependent on the quality of its water. But also, it's resulted in massive cost savings. So they got $300 million annual savings compared to the cost of an upgraded water treatment plant. So based on that, we've been developing over the last 20 years the water fund model, which is, as I described, a fund that effectively works on the basis of an integrated plan to develop these nature-based solutions, because these need to be locally adapted and well-placed in the landscape to deliver their results. Effectively, we set up governance mechanisms in order to bring different funders, sources together, which can be philanthropy, public subsidies, but also tariffs. A portion of tariffs can be allocated to these funding mechanisms. And we then implement on the ground these, or support the implementation of these nature-based solutions. We've done that in over 50 water funds so far. In Asia, even though there's a lot of potential, as I mentioned, it's not where we're most developed. We're doing this in North America, Latin America, Africa, Europe, and in Asia, in China. And in Indonesia, we've set up a network for encouraging investments in nature-based solutions. So that's incipient. I think there's a lot more that can be done in this area. And a key thing, and I'll try to be quick, is to see how these nature-based solutions can be combined with grey infrastructure. We're not saying it's a panacea. It cannot solve all water security challenges. What we're arguing in favor of is a greater share of nature-based solutions to improve the resilience. And it can therefore be identified as an add-on to an existing built system to enhance the benefits. So it could be, for example, a vegetated discharge zone at the outlet of a wastewater treatment plant. in order to polish the water before it goes back into the river and creating biodiversity benefits, etc. Or even better, it can be intentional and built into the planning of the investment so that you can avoid grey infrastructure investment. So in Cape Town, for example, we're working on restoring the watershed, removing invasive species in the basin, and that means that you can delay or substantially delay or even forego investments in desalination, which is a massive saving, right? So we shouldn't always think of it in terms of additional costs. It should be seen as saving. So just to say that, and you can take, I won't go through all this slide, but it is complex. It's not something that can be done that easily, but I would say probably not much more complex than grey infrastructure. It's just a bit newer because we need to do that at scale. And TNC, for that purpose, has set up a Nature for Water facility, which is a technical assistance facility, which helps with diagnosing water security challenges, identify where these nature-based solutions can work, perform return on investment analysis. So you can really compare these investments with grey infrastructure investments. And this facility works in three main ways. We have raised funding up front from philanthropy in order to carry out sponsored engagement. So we have calls every 6 months. The next one will be in the autumn, where we invite projects to come forward who need that kind of assistance. We provide technical assistance to the order of $150,000 for each project in order to build these watershed investment programs. We also can work on fee-for-service engagement, which is more like a consultancy service, if you want, for those entities that are interested. But the key point is that there is a strong knowledge management because we want to feed back that knowledge into the sector at large. It's not a pure private, it's not a private consultancy. It's really what our intention is to build knowledge and experience in building these watershed investment programs. So just in summary, we see investing in nature-based solutions as vital to deliver water security. At the moment, it represents a tiny fraction of total water sector investments, despite substantial needs, particularly in Asia, as we saw in our analysis. We recognize that financing NBS can be a challenge due to the need to combine multiple revenue streams, but there are solutions that involve governance and funding mechanisms to do that at scale in a coordinated manner. And the good news is technical assistance is available to do that and to help you do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive and very interesting presentation, especially the case study. Our next speaker is Monica Altamiriano, who leads integration of climate and water source management principles into investment decisions and identifies policy changes to increase investment. She has 18 years of experience in PPP. Monica, please come up. And you'll be talking about investor views for opportunities to invest in water and sanitation. Thank you.
Okay, let me find the presentation. Yes, please, I'm not very handy. Or the nerves are kicking.
Where's the mouse? You good with PDF or PowerPoint?
PowerPoint better, yeah. And with this one, yeah. Okay.
Sorry, it's downloading from the CV
Well,
SharePoint.
I can start. Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here and co-host this session with the Asian Development Bank. Really great to present our perspective, right? So maybe in the meantime that it gets set up, because I can imagine many of you do not know water equity. So water equity, we are an asset manager exclusively focused on solving, along with many other people, of course, the global water and sanitation crisis. We invest in financial institutions and companies, and also infrastructure, climate resilient infrastructure. But all is aim and focus on emerging markets and low-income communities. And our main reason of being with a sister organization or an innovation of water.org that was created 6 years ago, our main reason to exist is to harness and show capital markets that you can achieve risk-adjusted returns if you invest in water, so that water is a good investment. Now, what I want to be able to frame how we see the world as impact investors is, of course, important to give you a very quick overview of what has been happening, right, in the global finance architecture. And on the one hand, I think the first step in the changes that we see now was with the Addis Ababa Action Agenda in 2015, with a new vision on how development finance should work, where blended finance and output-based aid was put as central and needed. And then in each of those, like the Paris Agreement, I think the creation of the Green Climate Fund was agreed, but also it was highlighted that if we just have like around 15% of those funds in public hands, we need to look towards public-private collaboration to get that 100%. And then so far, I think Glasgow COP26, Sharm el-Sheikh COP27, they have set in motion a number of trends that are directly affecting impact investing. And that, to say also that at the same time, all those biodiversity COPs are pushing and putting to the front the materiality and the importance of climate and nature risk. And we all know here, of course, that water is quite central in both of them, right? So in terms of trends, we see that adaptation, the need to balance investments in adaptation versus mitigation has been highlighted in the last decade. The materiality of climate and nature risk, and the awareness of private sector and the financial sector that actually nature, not governments, give them their license to operate. And the need, I think, I cannot go in that much depth, and also it's great that Sophie already kind of went in depth on this, is that they need to look at investments also in that nexus, biodiversity, climate, water, where nature-based solutions play within the whole nexus. But also that we have to look at private sector participation, right? Now, we see that these are all opening opportunities for water, because all of this investment strategy that these actors have will have to, sooner or later, to consider water. But of course, I mean, let's start with the bad news, because there are some challenges in our sector, and that has also, I'm so sorry that I'm going already too quick. I was just here explaining the global finance architecture from the, you could say, those global agendas, right? Now, if we go more into the financial sector, there are a number of new regulations and standards, like the task force for the disclosure of climate-related risk or nature-related risks, the EU taxonomy for sustainable activities, but also I think the most recent of all, in May of this year, the Science-Based Target Network, which is very much private sector-led, has released the first science-based targets for nature, enabling companies to start taking ambitious and measurable action on climate and nature in tandem, right? So there is that need definitely to look at them together. Again, all of them are driving a shift on the financial sector and in corporate investments, and are really putting those corporations and private sector almost sometimes seem like the last scope leading into some of those discussions, right? And again, water is central there, and how do we make sure we exploit that potential? Now, while the opportunities are there, there are a number of challenges in our sector. I think a very important one is that many governments do not use the potential of their public procurement strategies to shape and create new markets, to create that enabling environment for that private sector participation to be impactful, but also financially sustainable, right? And how can we work with them on doing that? And then the fact, honestly, that private sector participation in water remains so controversial. The moment you talk about private sector participation, people translate it into privatization and put it in opposition to the idea that water is a human right. but it's kind of, I think we see where the world polarization trends are bringing us in many respects, and it's time to bring clarity and look at the mechanisms and not kind of like from a feeling or too much dogmatic perspective. The good news is that there are windows of opportunity for renew and rethinking of our sector. That's the adoption of climate and circularity concepts within, for example, in wastewater reuse. That's also, and I have been some time going from the water to the food sector, and there is an incredible commitment of companies to push and help their farmers transition to a regenerative agriculture that could have multiple benefits also in terms of water security. The potential of indirect public-private partnership models like Peru, for example, has been a success in that because the private party is not put in direct contact with the user. They remain in contact with the utility, for example. So you avoid some of these controversies. And last but not least, of course, the digitalization and the potential of disruptive and frugal innovations that could change the governance of water, and that could be a good thing. Of course, we have to manage it quite carefully. The question is, though, are we ready to make that shift, right? Because I think it was said also in the opening yesterday that I think it's time to go from our mentality of it's tragic and why nobody cares about water to, in the one hand, do a much more systemic analysis of our problems and zoom out, right, out of the water and what are the root causes of the problems that we are facing in the water sector. Most of them are in other decisions, in other sectors, but also at the same time frame, I was like, oh my God, another fire or something. Okay. Frame them, frame and communicate what we know will work in terms of solutions toward the private sector. Here you see a picture of Change Now. It's one of the biggest events taking place in France. More than 20,000 people go there, and very, very high on the agenda of the private sector. But they talk about, so this is the biggest event for solutions for the planet. So the way we communicate also could help. And the point also that actually, and I think I see here people from waste and other people investing in water, and we don't have enough well-prepared bankable projects. So if what we keep getting out of our systems is not good, maybe we have to look at the funnel that creates those investments and work actually towards more mission-oriented investment planning systems that work with ministers of finance and others. And there is work being done in that, but we could, I think, be a bit more active. So what I will share very quickly is then, how do you see those things happening, right, in the big world, in us as an impact investor, and our own rethinking journey? Because you know us probably from microfinance to access, for access to water and sanitation and a focus on households, but we know the big problems are also on those climate resilient infrastructure systems. And so here you see that the same evolution you saw there of how corporates and others are minding about these problems, you see it in the composition of our funds, right? We started around 6-7 years ago. Fund 1 was just an experiment with friends and family, but once it started to perform and we can show that we can generate risk-adjusted returns and got a track record, we were in the position to create a real fund, let's say, at a decent scale. Then the second one required a lot of blending, and the structure was very complex. We had 4 loans, 3 partner classes, and a first loss guarantee from a sponsor. And that's the moment we started to use development finance institution capital. And it was very difficult, but it gave us like a quality stamp that would help us, right, raise more finance and go further. The third one, like you see here, was much more simplified. And there we use, for example, DFC capital in a ratio 2-to-1 to increase the returns of the private sector parties to near market rate. And this was catalytic to bring another type of actors. In terms of time, it took us like 2 years to raise Fund 2, and Fund 3, which is 3 times larger, took us the same time, but COVID was there in between, and the last fund only took 12 months. So there is a scale and let's say a pace that we're gaining. And then again, you see those changes in the composition, right? You see the first fund, and you see in the last one, we have a whole set of new actors like corporates. And I think what is exciting, honestly, to have corporates on board besides the money, they have another logic as impact investors, because they do care very much about the materiality of those water risks. And they bring also that expertise. For example, as a climate impact director, I wanted really to introduce the fact that we should locate our investments within a watershed. Well, that's clear, because that's very important also for the investors from now on. So our journey has been, and we are having it right now, to go from a focus exclusively on access towards now we will be able to invest on projects, growth companies, and infrastructure projects that help contribute to the quality of freshwater bodies and also mitigate the impacts of scarcity. Here you see our infrastructure strategy. So it has two parts. Projects, so we will invest equity in special purpose vehicles doing medium-sized PPP projects, but there are not that many of those projects out there. And so we will also invest in growth companies, because there is also a process, right? And those local companies is also our focus. They can become project developers in the future that are able to have that resilience lens. Here is what we're looking for in terms of the type of investments criteria we have, and you will see there, but very quickly what is difficult, and maybe here is where we can fail. We are raising the money, but do we find the investment deals that can provide risk-adjusted returns? Well, for projects, the absence of a PPP framework and enabling environment are very important. Counterparty risk, because who are signing those contracts are entities with a low, let's say, poor financials, and then the government support to make projects viable. Things like viability gap funding that Philippines have, not every country has. And in terms of growth companies, many of these companies still rely on grants or CSR funding. So yeah, their business model is not that sound, right? Their business model are also very difficult to scale. And that's really important, because we want to support them in that growth stage. They have a low competitive mode. So somebody else can come tomorrow. We become equity partners, but somebody else come with the innovation as good. Yeah, then also the financials won't be that strong. And then again, counterparty risk, because they work for utilities and so forth. Yeah, with that, I'm 1 minute done that. Because we know that the investment pipeline is not there, we're working with our sister organization, Water.org, and other parties, but let's say we have some grant finance for technical assistance. So to make sure, though, that those investments we might come into the future have also those minimum climate resilience standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So our next speaker will be Anissa Dia Parawati, Deputy Director, Investment Planning in PAYU. This will be a remote presentation, and unfortunately, Dr. Eri Terasputra could not be with us here today, so the deputy will make the presentation. So hopefully there's no technical issues. Thank you.
Thank you in advance. Good morning, everyone in Stockholm. I will speak on behalf of Dr. Heri Trisaputra-Zuna, who's have other engagement, so he truly apologized for this. Your Excellencies, Dr. Insinyur Muhammad Basuki Hadi Mulyono, MSc, as the Minister of Public Works and Housing of Indonesia, Mr. Tom Panella, Director, Agriculture, Food, Nature, and Rural Development in Asia Development Bank, the honorable speakers and distinguished participants. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure and an honor to attend the Stockholm World Water Week 2023 Asia Pacific. Our sincere gratitude and enormous appreciation to the organizing committees for the effort to conduct such a big prestige event like this, and my warmest greetings to all distinguished participants. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, water is essential for economic growth, human health, and the environment. Countries around the world are facing significant challenges in managing their water resources efficiently and effectively. Developing countries are facing a shortfall of 4.2 trillion US dollar in financing to keep them on track for the 2023 Sustainable Development Goals. As governments and investors grapple with the health, economic, and social impact of the COVID-19 crisis. Indonesia, with other 194 countries, has committed to the Paris Agreement on climate change to improve water, food, and energy resilience, as well as to ensure socio-economic growth. Indonesia continues to strive achieving the Sustainable Development Goals agenda in various areas, particularly to achieve goal number 6, ensure availability and sustainability management of water and sanitation for all. In order to support the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals target number 6, Indonesia has included the water and sanitation targets into the 2020 to 2024 National Medium-Term Development Plan. The targets include the construction of 61 dams, 500,000 hectares of irrigations, additional 50 meter of raw water, and targeting 100 potable water and 30% pipe access to drinking water. To achieve these targets, a budget of 700.4 trillion is required. However, the government can only allocate the state budget of 474.9 trillion and the regional budget of local budget of 15.4 trillion. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to tackle these issues in Indonesia, water financing, Indonesia continues to strive in mobilizing new funding and financing mechanism by the following actions. First, ensuring the funding is available through mechanisms other than taxes, such as beneficiary fund financing and new revenue streams. The second one is leveraging debts and other financing innovations to ensure the repayment of the funding. The next, exploring new delivery scheme for water infrastructure, particularly to public-private partnerships with various investment returns, such as tariff, pure availability payment, as well as hybrid model. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we would like to recommend following financing innovations. First, establishing institutions that can channel funds and scale up investment. This platform is not only aimed at providing lower interest financing sources by blended financing facilities. In Indonesia, we have formed the Indonesia Water Fund to collect investor funds to accelerate the provision of water infrastructure. The next, establishing endowment fund to help reconstruct and to rebuild structures due to climate change disasters as an effort of climate change mitigation and adaptations. In regard to this innovation, the Ministry of Public Works and Housing is working with the Australian-Indonesia Partnership for Infrastructure, compiling a funding plan for climate resilient funds. The third one is initiating new approach in providing irrigation through public-private partnership with the availability payment scheme, which has been implemented in the Komering irrigation project in South Sumatra area. The next one, we are initiating the new approach for revitalization and modernization of high-level diversions, interconnection channel through public-private partnership scheme with availability payment scheme, which has been implemented in West Nusa Tenggara province. The fifth one is initiating new approaches in public-private partnership scheme in water supply system-related infrastructure, with strong government involvement, encourage inclusivity with integrated upstream to downstream implementations, or we call it source-to-tap concept. The concept of source-to-tap have been applied in the Insinyur Haji Juanda or Jatiluhur Second Drinking Water Supply Project. This project integrates the upstream to downstream financing, and construction will be carried out by one special purpose vehicle to minimize interface designs, risk, and schedule delays. The last one is encouraging, the sixth one is encouraging standardization tariff policy to ensure the certainty of water tariff, to strengthen investment, and to ensure the cross-subsidized tariff mechanism policy to benefit the marginalized. Regarding this innovation, we are currently drafting regulation for standardizing Indonesian water rates. The last one, encouraging the use of renewable energy, or we call it green energy, to reduce the impact of climate change and increasing costs in regard to declining raw water quality. We have optimized the utilization of water resources infrastructure for hydropower and floating solar PV in the Bintang Bano PPP project. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, apart from sharing our experiences in this great opportunity, allow me invited to the 10th World Water Forum in Bali, the largest international meeting in water sector. We would present the sub-theme of sustainable water finance. And we already held the series of events for these sub-themes that has been held in the form of workshops, resulting of the following idea. The first idea, we propose solutions such as expanding PPP to financing to water, adopting integrated source-to-tap approach, and implementing blended finance models. The second one, we have the innovation in the form of blended finance platforms, which includes managing political interface and planning risk, and enhancing government policies to support blended finance are being proposed. The third one, we also discussing about the development of small-scale PPP, project structurization to increase efficiency, and the improvement of creditworthiness for service providers to access microfinancing facilities. And we will be having our upcoming workshop, and we will discuss about promoting green finance and securing funding for water crisis prevention and climate resilience. I sincerely hope that it will generate the new great ideas, identify and elaborate new initiatives, and promote collaborative actions in addressing water financing challenges. Wish you all a great and fruitful sessions. On behalf of Dr. Heri Trisaputra Zuna as the Director General of Infrastructure Financing for Public Works and Housing. Thank you very much.
Presentation, and also we appreciate your sticking to time. So the next presenter is Mira Mehta, a professor emeritus at CRDF, CEPT University, and the Center for Water Sanitation. Dr. Mehta has over 45 years of experience in water, urban development, and infrastructure across Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. Please, Dr. Mehta, take the floor. And again, we're very short on time, so if you can keep to your 10 minutes, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, ADB, and for inviting me for this important conference. And I'll try, as you say, I understand the time limits, so I'll try and keep it. I'm going to speak more about sanitation. If somebody can show the slides from there, be good. Although most people are focused on water, I am going to focus more on sanitation. And as we know, the SDG 6.2, particularly on safely managed sanitation, is actually falling behind. I'm not suggesting that it is falling behind only because of investments or lack of projects, but it is falling behind. And the issue is really that there is emphasis needed in terms of safely managed sanitation across the entire sanitation chain, starting from access to the conveyance, the containment at septic tank level, or in terms of other methods, conveyance either through vacuum truck or through sewerage systems, treatment and reuse. And this is very important. And what I'm going to try and do is, instead of looking at just the investment requirements, I'm going to share very quickly a few examples from, can I have the next slide, please? Few examples from India, which focus on different aspects of this service chain. Next. So in terms of access, I'm going to talk of access to credit for toilets, something that I think the lady from Water Credit actually talked about. But this is an example from India, from one of the states, and in fact, in partnership with Water Credit that we have worked on this. Second is, which is often forgotten, and especially in FSM or on-site sanitation system, is the issue of conveyance. So that is the second model or second aspect that I will focus on. The third is, which is generally focused on in terms of investment requirements, particularly, is the treatment and then the reuse. Next slide. Reuse is very important because that is often neglected in terms of looking at safely managed sanitation. So in terms of access to sanitation at the household level, it is very, although as most of you probably are aware, Government of India has a very large program referred as the Swachh Bharat or Clean India Mission, and in which there has been funding provided by the public sector, public finance for individual toilets. But this actually also requires access to additional funding because generally the funding from government is not sufficient. So how can this be enabled? And India has a very large group of what are known as the women self-help groups, SHGs, and who actually have very great linkages with the microfinance sector and with the commercial bank sector. This is the other advantage, of course, that India has, and also many African countries also have, is the whole issue of the development of the banking sector. And so this linkage is very important. And using this linkage in one of the states in India, state of Maharashtra, where we work, we have supported access to SHG women. So it is on a commercial basis, this finance is mobilized. Next. Second is the whole issue of, as I said, in the safely managed, the whole service chain. After access, the whole issue of conveyance becomes very important. It is true that generally private sector is involved in this, but if you really want to move toward a citywide sort of sanitation model where everybody has access to such a facility easily, then involvement of local government or utilities is very, very critical. And it is to support this that in one of the cities in, again, the state of Maharashtra, where we developed a PPP model, and that using that, it was possible to provide services of scheduled desludging over a 3-year cycle. In one of the cities, the whole 3-year cycle has been completed, and a second round of such a model has been taken up with the next round of private sector. So this is something that we initially developed in 2 cities in state of Maharashtra. It is now being scaled up across many cities in Maharashtra. So this is a second aspect or second example of how commercial finance through a PPP model can be mobilized. Next slide. The next is the whole focus on treatment, and there are more examples of mobilizing funding and through private sector involvement in the sanitation treatment space. Some of you maybe are familiar with the new term that has been developed, referred to as a hybrid annuity model, HAM as it is referred to. And it essentially enables private sector developers to come in, private sector providers to come in, meet part of the cost, and part of the funding comes from the government. And over a time, the private sector is refunded their money. So during the construction phase, up to 40% of capital cost is met by the government. 60% is met by the private sector entities. And during the O&M phase, generally over 10 to 15 years, through an annuity-based model, the private sector is being repaid. This is being taken up in North India. You might be familiar with the Ganges River, where major projects are being taken up, funded through a lot of different institutions, including the government, World Bank, I think ADB also, and so on. 32 major sewage treatment plants have been taken up using this model, and a total value of about 1.4 billion USD. So it's a very large kind of a plan that is afoot. Progress, however, is slow because there is likelihood that project development takes a lot of time, and there may be at times hesitancy from the private sector in terms of the likely delays or likely payment shortfalls from the government. The World Bank funding that I refer to has now for the first time sanctioned a US $19 million grant guarantee facility. I think this is the first time that guarantee facility is being extended for a sanitation related projects. And under that, now HAM projects are being taken up more successfully. Similar activity is being taken up for fecal sludge treatment plants in 2 of the states in India, and about 200 FSTPs are planned. Again, progress is still slow, but I think over time, hopefully this will develop further. Next. The other area where this is, next slide, please. This is very happening on major way, or there is good potential is to use the treatment facilities linked with reuse of treated wastewater. And this is something that in India is receiving a lot of attention from the regulators, as well as from the cities themselves and the state governments. This is an example from one of the cities in the state of Maharashtra, where we again provide support, is that a PPP project was taken up with the local government, in this case the Nagpur Municipal Council, and a thermal power plant, which needed the water at a large scale. And they have jointly then funded this activity for the sewage treatment plant. And over time, the private sector is being repaid through this arrangement. So this is a very viable arrangement that is being taken up. In fact, based on this, the government of Maharashtra also issued a reuse policy, especially linked to such an activity. And this is something that is hopefully over time will be taken up in other cities also. Next. There have also been some efforts by private industries themselves. And this is a very interesting example where no other outside agency was involved, but the 2 cities in the one of the districts in the very
Hello, can you
water.
try to wrap up pretty quickly here, please? Thank you.
Yeah. So here the private industry has itself invested funding to take up this activity and for building sewage treatment plant, and they are using the treated water, treated wastewater in their industry. And this is through an arrangement with the local government in these cities. Next slide. And lastly, I wanted to highlight that although we talk about PPPs, we need to also look at the possibilities of local governments and utilities mobilizing commercial finance, not through a PPP arrangement necessarily, but through markets, through arrangements like municipal bonds. And this is something that has been being done over the last few years in India. Over time, last few years, about over $500 million of funding has been mobilized for wash projects, particularly for sanitation projects across cities in India. And there is huge potential for taking up municipal bonds and green bonds within this kind of arrangement. And this is something that needs to be looked at. And next slide. Lastly, I just want to highlight that in all of these, either PPP or commercial funding arrangements, it is extremely important to have. Usually we talk of governance, but in this case, it is really the good monitoring systems which are very, very critical. The IoT-enabled monitoring systems that we are now working on and are being put in place in the state of Maharashtra and across India actually are very critical. One of the issues that private sector players face is the issue of delayed payments. And this
We
is
really
something
have to
that again,
close this. We have
yeah,
one more
this
presenter
is the
and we're
last.
delayed. Yeah, please make
That's
your
it.
closing
Yeah.
statement. Thank you.
No, okay, the last slide. So these are the three major points that I wanted to make. Emerging opportunities for mobilizing this kind of finance across sanitation sector, across the value chain. Instead of only looking at design PPP projects, also look at commercial finance through municipal bonds, through credit from banks, and to focus on good monitoring systems. Thank you. I don't think I took too much time, did I? I'm surprised, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation and very clear. For our next presenter, I want to introduce Satoshi Aishi, who's the Director for Strategy and Partnership Team at ADB in the Urban and Water Development Sector Group. And he'll give a presentation. I think due to time constraints, we probably will not have Q&A because we have to prepare the room and people would like to get a coffee. So I suggest just after Satoshi finishes, he can say thank you and the session will be over. Thank you.
You're already wrapping up. Thank you very much. Distinguished guests and Minister Vasuki, very nice to meet you. My name is Satoshi. I'm the new director of the strategy and partnership in ADB. I will be very quick. I think we have been hearing a lot of information and then different financing modality, PPPs and small scale, large scale. This is really, really great. And I just don't want to maybe repeat the same things here. ADB has a large bank, and then we have been doing all sort of things. The other colleagues now talking about more small scale, small and medium size, the service providers, how we're gonna reach out to the last mile of the customers. Here, I wanna talk a little bit about the different part, the water utility. And here we talk about sovereign and non-sovereign. If you're not familiar with the term, sovereign normally means a sovereign guaranteed loan or product, which is our public finance. And then a non-sovereign is a non-sovereign guaranteed loan, which is actually the private sector financing. So we are just trying to work on these two arms. ADB has a very unique organization. I have to say that we have this public sector and then the private sector teams are sitting under the one roof of ADB, and we understand this is really our strength, but we didn't really materialize these strengths internally. So this time, we are not talking about like what we should do and then outside and then who has to do what, but we also looking at ourselves in ADB that are we really changing ourselves fast enough to responding to our region, which is Asia and Pacific. So I will go very quick. Our strategy 2030, this is really our corporate strategy. We have 7 operational priority targets about poverty, gender equality, climate change, making city more livable, governance, agriculture. There's no water. But then actually water really cut across every 7 operational priorities, and then that's where we think about the water. And then to get this strategy 2030, which is the achieving the prosperous, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable Asia and Pacific, we have several key approaches. 1, expanding private sector operation. A third number of the ADB committed operation will be private sector loan or private sector related activity. And also leveraging. So we are trying to catalyze more money. So $1 in private sector operation should be matched with the $2.5 of the co-financing. So this actually meaning that ADB is not crowding out those commercial money to coming in, but we're trying to crowding in by staying in this region, then being the catalytic role as an honest broker. And last bit is the strengthening the knowledge. this year, we are actually looking ourselves that, this is the year 2023. Are we really fast changing enough? So are we really achieving these 2030 targets? And then are we changing ourselves to respond to this Asian and Pacific region? We are saying that by 2030, that there might be only little low-income country by then in Asia and Pacific. Those countries may moving up to the lower middle-income country, and those lower middle-income countries become upper middle-income country. So we have to look ourselves and see, are we responding to this? And are we ready to this? So we are preparing this fourth shift. Then first is the climate change. We declare ourselves as a climate bank. We're going to commit it. Second is the private sector. As I said, strengthening our role as a catalyst to bring in more private sector money. Third is the solution. We just would like to emphasize that evaluate our role as a regional solution bank, fostering the knowledge sharing, and then also bringing more innovation. Those are very important to achieve our 2030 goal. Then it comes to the middle, ways of working. It's kind of after COVID, we are changing the type of the way that we work as well, but we also changing ourselves that whether we are going to respond to this enough, and we are going through the gradual reorganization started this year, not happening one day, but then it's going to be the next 2 or 3 years. And then the ultimate objective, which I thought I'm gonna say at the last bit, but I should say now, really is that trying to bring public and private sector department together in one roof. So for example, we have a water and urban development office. We want to have a 2 team working together for the blended finance. They are learning each other. We can be responding to the client's needs much more quickly. So we actually, this is one of the small projects in Vietnam, which we had approved in 2020. I just wanted to quickly introduce this project because although this is a small project, this is kind of showing our future. Well, future is a little bit exaggerating, but then this is something that we want to work for it. So now this is one of the company in Vietnam, Binh Duong Water and Environment Joint Stock Company. We call it BWASE. BWASE has been our long-standing partner under our public sector. They have received our sovereign loan twice, 2001 and 2012. We have been building their asset. We have been providing a lot of capacity building, and then they have been growing as the independent, strong water utility. In 2016, they became corporatized. In the Vietnamese term, is equitized. So they became not eligible for the public finance, which is a sovereign guaranteed loan anymore. Now they are moving into this non-sovereign field, trying to borrow or raise funds from the private sector. From public sector team, we have been seeing that this is our best, one of the best utility ready for flying. But then when we brought this customer to our private sector team, they say, no, they are not creditworthy. They are small. Their asset, there's so much risk, we cannot even work for it. And we realized that there are certain area of the gap between our 2 operations. ADB should be able to provide a seamless solution from both public to the private. But our product and then our team is not ready to work on this customer in the market where they have been grown already, receiving a lot of public sector financing, but they are not ready. So this is kind of our trial to see very small, very simple loan, $8 million from us. Luckily, we got a co-financing from JICA, 8 million, so $16 million, 100,000 cubic meter per day water supply, very simple project, not exposing too much, the exposure to the financial exposure is not too much. But then we are trying to bring these 2 teams together to work on this. So we call it, this is ADB's, we call it value addition, one ADB approach, meaning that now these 2 teams of ADB are working together to address and work with this kind of client. So our loan is coming with the 0.5 million technical assistance grant, which was provided by our public sector team. This actually brings to help company further increase their credit worthiness we have been dealing with the government for the strengthen the legal framework, their service agreement. We are also enhancing their corporate governance. We are also accelerating their transition from Vietnamese accounting standard to international financing accounting standards so that they can communicate with the international investors. So we are starting with small joint team working on the public sector team and private sector team and trying to start work and then trying to get such project. And we're trying to access to this market. And we see that this was successfully done. And then we have been having a very successful relationship with them. And then now we are looking to replicate this model within Vietnam, within other Southeast Asian country, within other Asian Pacific. So this is one of the approach that we would like to take. Maybe we think this is one possibility. I don't say ADB is not going to continue doing this all the time. We have been doing all sorts of things. But one of the shift that we are going to make under this strategy 2030, we are seeing that are we changing fast enough? Now we want to bring these two teams gradually together, and we're going to address to this market so that we can provide a seamless support for crowding in the private money. I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. That does conclude, and I want people to have a bit of time for coffee. We also have to set this room up for the next session. I encourage you to engage the speakers during the rest of the conference. Everything was very interesting. And I think the sessions will be available through Asia Pacific Water Forum online website, either the recording and possibly the presentations. So if people wanted to get more information, they'll be able to do so. Thank you.
Recording stopped.